You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 174. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Do you ever feel like you're biding your time at work? You might find that your job is good. You like it. You might even love parts of it. But the way it's going, you don't know if you can really see yourself there for the long term. It may be that you love the area of practice that you're in. You love the type of files. You love the people that you work with. But there's something that's not quite right. Maybe you don't see it as sustainable, or you just don't see anybody in your organization whose life and practice you aspire to have for yourself. If you find yourself in this position, then you are not alone. You are like many of the lawyers that I work with. And those are just the lawyers that I work with. And so I suspect there are a lot of lawyers out there who are thinking this, but who aren't saying anything about it. And so what I would love to offer for you today is a conversation. I would love to imagine that you and I are sitting at your favorite coffee shop for a heart-to-heart. And what I'd love to offer to you is a way to help you navigate this stage of your practice, right? Instead of biding your time where you are, I want to help you thrive where you are so that whether you choose to stay or whether you choose to go, you have set yourself up for success. Thank you for joining me here today. I'm thrilled to have you, and I'm excited for this virtual coffee date that you and I are having. So let's go back to the original problem. The problem being that you're in a position that is good, but you don't know if it really is the long run. And you'll know or be able to relate to this if you keep telling yourself things like you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You don't really know if you want to stay or go. Maybe you're sitting on your fence, or you just have trouble seeing yourself where you are right now in the longer term. Now, as a result, you might feel like you're going around in circles, right? You might find that you're having the same conversation with your partner, with your friends, with your family. It may even just be a thought loop that circles around in your own mind. Maybe it quiets down when you're having a really good stretch, but then something happens at work and you go back to this same feeling of, I just don't know if this is for me. I don't know if I want to be here long term. What are my options? There's got to be something that's better suited to me. You might find that you're spinning your wheels. It can feel a little bit frustrating. You might be annoyed with yourself for being indecisive, for not taking action. And yet you might also find that this is not something that is urgent, right? Whether you stay or go isn't time sensitive from your perspective, right? You might have other priorities right now, right? Maybe you're moving houses and you only want to have one new change in your life. So you're going to put your job on hold for now. Or maybe you're planning to start a family and you don't want to rock the boat before then, or you've already started a family and where you are is reasonably flexible and you know that you can make it work, and you worry that if you went somewhere else, it would be harder for you to swing that. Sometimes it's just that you're busy with work and you've got client files, you've got closings, you've got trials, you've got big projects that you're working on, and you're so busy that you don't really have time to think about what you want to do next. And as a result, you might find yourself in this no man's land, right? Where you're in your role and you're going through the motions, but it's feeling reactive. It feels like you're just doing what you need to do to get by. And you don't really feel like you're growing in the way that you want to. And when that happens for too long, what you then find is that you become increasingly disengaged, and it's almost like you're falling behind. And so the purpose of this episode, this conversation that we're having, is to help you get on a track where you feel proactive, where you feel like you're in charge, even if the role that you're in right now isn't necessarily the role that you see yourself being in the future. So where do we begin with this? what I would invite you to do is to imagine that you are running on parallel tracks with your current employer, whether that employer is a law firm or another organization. The reason that I like the idea of parallel tracks is that there are things that you can do today that will benefit you and that will benefit your employer because your goals are aligned. So in that way, you're running along parallel tracks. So you can maximize the time that you have right now by choosing to undertake activities that align with your goals and your employer's goals. And it may be that at some point those paths diverge, but for now, there are a number of things that you can do proactively to improve the situation that you're in. Now, when it comes to identifying what those things might be, it helps to further refine your focus. And I'd encourage you to look at 3 different areas of your practice in order to find out how you're going to cultivate your skills, how you're going to develop while you are in your current role and potentially exploring other options. Now, before I share what those 3 areas are, I would invite you to do a check-in with yourself. So if we were having a conversation, I would ask you a question about how committed you are to staying in your current role. This will give you an indication of how happy or how unhappy you are in that position. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is you're 100% committed to staying and 0 is you've decided with certainty that you want to go, where do you fit on that spectrum? And if you are at a relatively low number, you're maybe a 1 or a 2, that will inform the way that you approach this exercise. If you are at a 7 or an 8, that will also inform the way that you respond to this exercise. So just getting that check-in with yourself will help you orient yourself in terms of what you're likely going to do, right? If you're exploring your options and you're at a 1 or a 2, those options are really probably a lot more imminent than if you're at an 8 or a 9, right? If you are at an 8 or a 9, you might be checking your options just to make sure that you are on the path that you want to be on. But if you're at the other end of the spectrum, then you might be more seriously exploring what it would look like to leave. So where are you on that spectrum? You might be right smack in the middle, right? Which again, lends itself to this feeling of being somewhat in a waiting game, somewhat biding your time. And so we just want to make sure that you're being proactive regardless of where you are on that spectrum. A second question you might ask yourself is, are you willing to walk away, right? That question will also help you decide what your relationship is with your current employer. You may have had situations in the past, whether it was other jobs, whether it was a relationship, whether it was a living situation, where you did everything you could to make it work. And at a certain point, you just decided that enough is enough and you're willing to walk away. Again, that will influence the way that you approach the suggestions that I have in terms of what you can do on that parallel track. So turning to the first area, I would invite you to think about your legal skills. So just to give you a heads up, we're going to talk about developing your legal skills, your practice management skills, and your relationships. Those are the 3 areas that I would invite you to focus on. So starting with your legal skills, where you are right now, there are going to be opportunities for you to develop your skills. And the way I would recommend approaching this is to ask yourself what skills you want to develop over the next several years and to make a list of those skills. You can do research by asking people what they see as the next steps for you. You might look to lawyers who are a few years ahead of you and see what type of work they are doing and add those skills to your list. You might consult with a mentor or another senior lawyer and seek their input on skills that you think or that they think that you might start building. And so what you'll end up with is a list of skills. You might look at what really motivates you, what seems interesting to you. You might look at what types of files you want to work in, what practice areas maybe are within your broader area that you want to get more experience in. If you're a litigator, for example, and you've been a junior for other more senior lawyers on big trials, and maybe what you want is a little bit more experience handling files of your own, then you might seek out opportunities to be that point person, to take ownership over more files, to do more of the procedural steps on your own. If you're a deal lawyer, maybe you've been doing a lot of the due diligence type work or behind the scenes work, and you want to take on a more prominent role. You want to be more client facing. You want to be working more directly in negotiating and designing deals. So wherever you are and whatever the nature of your practice, I'd invite you to make a list of what the skills are that you want to develop. And then I would invite you to figure out a plan to start developing them. And what that will show you and what that will teach you is, number one, you'll start to develop your skills. You'll start to be more proactive in soliciting the type of work that will help you develop those skills. You'll learn what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, where you have room to grow. And you'll also learn what opportunities are available to you within your organization. And you'll probably also start to learn about opportunities that exist outside of your organization. So if there's a particular practice area that you're really interested in, but they don't offer it where you are, then you might start exploring where you might go to gain that type of experience. So that is really step one, is to cultivate and to proactively develop your legal skills. Now, the second area that I would encourage you to be proactive in developing is your practice management skills. So what I often see happen is lawyers feel unhappy where they are because their practice feels out of control. They feel like they don't have control over their time. They are spending their evenings and weekends at work. They can't leave their work behind. They feel frustrated. They don't see this as a sustainable approach to their life. And so as a result, they question whether or not they can stay in their current role. Now, sometimes this problem can be fixed by tightening up and refining your practice management skills. And the best way to figure out if that is a solution is to be proactive in trying to implement some changes. Now, again, going back to your level of commitment to your firm and whether or not you're willing to walk away, that will inform some of the strategies that you will be willing to employ when it comes to testing this out, to building and creating a system that works for you. So boundaries, for example, is one area where a lot of lawyers struggle, right? They struggle asserting boundaries. They struggle to put boundaries around their time. So this may be an excellent opportunity for you to learn how to assert and maintain your boundaries. And you will learn that maybe it can be difficult. Maybe you get pushback. Maybe you get pushback initially and then everybody adapts and it works really well. Maybe you find that there are certain lawyers or practice areas where it's easier for you to set boundaries relative to others. And what you're doing here is you're developing that skill. You're assessing where and how you would be most successful in carving out and creating the kind of boundaries that you want for your practice and your life. Another area where I see lawyers struggle is with motivation and procrastination. So it may be that what you really need are tools and strategies that you can implement in order to overcome that procrastination, to increase your motivation. And what you might find is even when you implement all the tools, all the strategies, you still don't feel motivated. And maybe the problem isn't so much the technique, it's that the work that you're doing simply isn't the type of work that you want to do long term. And it's for that reason that you're not able to get yourself motivated, which would then give you information that would be really helpful in deciding whether to stay where you are, maybe switching your practice area, switching your focus, or whether or not that would require that you go somewhere else to do work that you find more engaging. Finally, what you might also consider is if your plate is so full and you feel stretched way too thin, and what you really need is more team support, right? You need lawyers who can support you, students, staff who can support you. This may be an opportunity for you to develop that team, to be proactive in recruiting a team that can support you, learning how to delegate effectively, learning how to relinquish control over your work. It is really hard to do, especially for perfectionists who are used to doing things a certain way and getting a positive result for it. This may be a really good time for you to start developing those skills. Again, that will show you whether or not you can stay in your current role and create boundaries, create systems, create a team that can support you such that you're now feeling like this is where you see yourself, where you can see yourself long term. It is much more sustainable. Or you might discover that actually the problems that you're having here are not fixable by time management and practice management solutions, which will give you more information that will help you decide whether or not to stay or to go. Finally, you will want to focus on your relationships. Here, I would encourage you to look at your market, the people who pay you for your legal work, whether they pay you indirectly because they're your internal clients, right? The other lawyers who give you work, or they're clients of the firm or organization who are those true clients that are paying from externally. I would encourage you to examine who you're working with, who you might be working with, who you would like to work with within your practice group, within other practice groups that may refer you work. If you work at a firm that has multiple offices, are there lawyers in other offices who you would like to create relationships with, who may be internal clients for you? And I would encourage you to proactively go about building your profile. Take on some of those profile building initiatives, whether it's individual coffees and lunches and meetings, just to get to know people and to help to show them the type of work that you do, how you can help support them in their practice, or lunch and learns where you might be presenting on a particular topic. I would also invite you to think about building your relationships externally within the legal profession, befriending other lawyers, joining bar associations, to present where there are opportunities for continuing education, to show yourself as an authority in your practice area, to teach people, to show them how you can support them, to your external clients, whether these are clients in a particular industry or the end users of your services. The idea here is that you want to cultivate relationships. You want to build a network that will, at the same time, enhance your profile within your current role and also enhance your profile outside of your role. And I've spoken on the podcast before about marketing, and I would invite you to go back to those episodes to get some ideas about how to do that. But the idea here is for you to be building up your relationships. And if you choose to stay, these relationships will help you advance within your career, right? You will develop relationships with lawyers and mentors who may choose to then sponsor you and share opportunities with you, make sure that you are being promoted, make sure that you are being recognized. And so if you choose to stay, these relationships will enhance your experience of where you're at currently. And if you choose to go, then you've got that network ready-made, right? You've got lawyers within your firm who will support you. You've got lawyers who are outside of your firm who will share opportunities with you, and you will learn about more opportunities because you will simply have that expanded network. I always think it's better to be expanding your network when you don't need your network, when you're not looking for a job, when you're not desperate for finding clients, right? There's a different energy and you'll feel so much more confident going into those relationships because you know that you're doing this from a place of curiosity, of shared interests, of expanding your network, not from a place of I have to, but because I want to. So these are the 3 areas that I'd encourage you to focus on, right? When you build your legal skills, you cultivate those intentionally. When you tighten your practice management skills, when you develop your relationship, all of these are going to benefit you. You are going to benefit from having that greater skill set. You are going to benefit from a tightly run practice. You are going to benefit from those relationships, and so will your organization as long as you are within the organization. Their clients are getting better service. Their teams are having the opportunity to work with you. They are able to support you the way that they want to support you in your growth. Now, if you choose to go elsewhere, if after all of this you realize that this is not the right place for you, then those are all skills that you carry with you. Those are relationships that you get to maintain after you have moved on. And so this is a win-win situation. Now, why this is going to be effective for you is now you've got a proactive growth plan that you can implement that doesn't depend on you staying or going. Right? You can explore your options comfortably while you continue to build where you are right now. Again, going back to that idea of biding your time, it doesn't feel very good. It doesn't feel growth oriented. And what this will do is it teaches you how to be the author of your own fortune. One of the areas that I see lawyers struggle in is that taking ownership of your own career. If you are used to a system where the rules are set out for you, the milestones are set out for you, it can be really difficult to make that transition. So for example, in law school, you need to write the LSAT and make your way into law school. Then you get classes, you have tests that you need to write, you've got papers you need to write, you've got professors who are marking your exam, giving you grades. Then you want to article, you have to write a bar exam, you have to satisfy a checklist, and then you become a lawyer. And all of a sudden, there's this great expanse where nobody is really telling you what to do. So what this does, when you adopt this parallel tracks approach, even if you're not looking to leave your job, right? If you simply start being strategic in your practice, looking at these 3 practice areas, or these 3 areas of your practice, I should say, and being intentional about cultivating them, you are now developing that business mindset. You are now being the agent of change in your practice. You're not waiting for somebody else to give you work. You're not waiting for somebody else to tell you to do something. You are being proactive and making that happen for yourself. And these are all skills that you get to take with you throughout your career. If you stay, you've positioned yourself for success. You now have a greater skill set. You know how to go about creating an even greater skill set. You've developed that practice. You know where you want to go. You've got a practice that is well run, where you are now able to get your work done effectively. You can teach other lawyers, you can bring other lawyers onto your team, and you've got those relationships, right? So you now feel really connected and hardwired into the fabric of your firm or organization. You've also positioned yourself for success, if that's ultimately what you choose to do, if you leave the organization, because now you've got that network, you've got those skills, you've got those practice management skills, and you will feel more confident as a result as you go out and explore the options that you are interested in. You also will have ruled out which problems are fixable because you've done the work to try to resolve them, and problems that are not fixable. And you may decide that there are problems that can't be fixed and that they're relatively minor, that in the grand scheme, you're actually really happy where you are. And the chances of that happening are greater if you are being proactive across the board. And you might also decide that there are certain fundamental problems with the place you're at. Maybe there are simply not opportunities available for what you want to do, in which case you now know that you need to move on. And finally, when you do this, you don't feel forced to make a hasty decision. You don't feel like you're wasting time or biding your time, right? You're growing whether or not you stay. And so you get to make a decision at a pace that feels right for you, all the while growing. There are a number of skills that you will need to implement in order to adopt this strategy. If you find right now that you feel like you're biding your time, chances are you've fallen into certain habits, certain practices, advertently or inadvertently, and so you might need to start changing those. So for example, if you have not been proactive about asking for work, you might need to go and start asking for that. And that might feel uncomfortable. It might feel different for you. It might mean approaching lawyers you haven't approached before, having conversations that might feel a little bit awkward. You might need to start asserting boundaries, right? This can also feel awkward if it's not something that you're used to doing. Again, if you have decided that you are willing to walk away, that might help you figure out how strongly you want to assert those boundaries, right? If this truly is a deal breaker for you and you need to know if you can have those boundaries, then that might help you be more confident and more certain that these are conversations that you want to have, and then you'll be proactive in going about having them. And when you learn to have those conversations, when you learn to set boundaries, you get to take that skill forward with you, whether you stay or go. You might need to initiate relationships, and that can be hard if you feel like you're risking rejection or lack of interest, and so that might feel uncomfortable. You may need to position yourself as an authority, whether you're marketing yourself and raising your profile internally or externally. That might be new to you, and so that might require you to pull yourself up a learning curve that feels a little bit foreign. You will also need to keep an open mind. So if you have written off where you are currently, but you are choosing to stay, I would invite you to keep an open mind about what possibilities might exist when you take this new approach, when you start being proactive in developing your skills, developing your practice, and developing your relationships. You'll also need to pay close attention to what you actually like. So as you're testing and trying and exploring, I'd invite you to use your energy as a bit of a litmus test, right? If you find that something drains your energy, that's a clue, right? That maybe this isn't something that you want to base your practice on, whether it's people that you work with or a certain practice area or a type of work. If it's really draining for you, you really dread it, maybe it's something that you want to steer away from. And conversely, if you find that you feel energized by working with a certain group of people or on certain projects or certain types of files, then you know that you may want to incorporate more of that into your work. You may need to overcome feelings of resistance and resentment. It may be that you feel like you haven't been given the best opportunity where you are, that maybe there's resistance when you're trying to grow, and that can feel really frustrating. And so part of your work might be learning to overcome that feeling of resistance and resentment and forge ahead anyways. And then finally, this may require that you build up your confidence. A lot of lawyers feel uncertain about whether or not they're going to succeed, whether they stay where they are, whether they go somewhere else, whether their efforts are going to be rewarded. And so this can be a really powerful exercise for building your confidence, because as you are more proactive, as you make things happen, you will develop a greater sense of agency and control over your practice. And that in turn will help you build your confidence. So instead of being somebody who is simply biding their time, who is taking what they can get, you become a person who is able to create their own outcomes. And that is really empowering. That is really confidence building. And what will happen as a result is ultimately you may stay where you are, or you may find that you find something that is better suited to you, that you gave it everything that you could, that you tried to build up your skills, you tried to build your practice, you tried to get everything in order, and yet it wasn't a good fit for you. And in the meantime, you learned of opportunities that were better suited to you. But either way, you will have made a decision. In the meantime, you will build up those skills. You will build up your legal skills. You will be able to create more value and serve your clients more broadly. You will know how to manage your practice more effectively. You will have taken risks when it comes to setting boundaries, when it comes to delegating, when it comes to figuring out how best to overcome challenges with procrastination and lack of motivation. So you will have stronger skills as a result, and you will have created a network of relationships with individuals, both internally and externally, that will last you throughout your career. So you will be in a better position whether you choose to stay or go. And finally, you will have built your confidence as a practitioner and as a decision maker. So that, my dear friend, is what I have to share for you. And I hope that you have enjoyed this virtual coffee as much as I have. And I would love to continue this conversation with you. If you would like further help, if you would like to dive into what it would look like for you to cultivate the skills that you in particular would like to cultivate, if you want help figuring out how to get on top of your practice, if you want help to strategically build your network, these are all areas where I support lawyers, where I can provide coaching and insights, and I would love to help you do that. So please do feel free to reach out to me, whether by email, on LinkedIn, by filling out the submission form on my website. There are lots of different ways you can reach me. And if you'd like my help, I would absolutely love to provide it. So with that, my dear friend, I am going to thank you for this lovely coffee date. I hope that you have learned a new strategy, some new approaches that you can take. If you feel like you are biding your time, I want you to feel like you're thriving no matter what container that you are in. And I hope that today's conversation has helped you do that. So with that, thank you again for joining. I look forward to reconnecting with you again soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.